Aliens, UFOs, and people floating from their beds, evil doppelgangers, animal mutilation, demonic voices, men in black, and other mysterious creatures. On June the 1st, 1996, John and Joyce Edmonds purchased a ranch in Rainbow Valley, Arizona, and what's followed during the past 24 years defies logic and reality. John, along with Bruce McDonald, detail these events in their best-selling book, Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story. And John Edmonds is joining us right now. Hi, John.
Hello.
Man, it's 24 years. It's been quite a ride for you, and it's been 3 years since there was a story that appeared in the New York Post about the Stardust Ranch. So I just wanted to ask, firstly, has the weirdness continued since that story was posted?
It's been continual. I mean, we go through, high points and low points, but, things are never going to stop. I don't believe out here. I mean, before we were here, there were other people that were here, and we've actually had prior owners, or people that leased this property from, decades ago. And, they've said that the reason they left the property was because of the same sort of activity. So this has just been ongoing.
Okay, well, that takes care of a question I had. I was going to ask you about the previous owners, but I thought in a nutshell, just talk about the main events that have taken place on the ranch in the last 24 years and that have disrupted your life.
Oh boy. The whole thing has been disruptive. I mean, I professionally, before we really took over this ranch, my wife worked for the FBI, and I was working as a psychiatric social worker with the Superior Court and had a private practice working through the largest mental health provider here in Arizona. And so, I mean, when you buy a ranch and you have the kind of things happen that happen here, I found it impossible to continue to keep up the practice and to, be working in a therapeutic setting. And so, I went from having a great income with, lots of professional opportunities and good things happening to suddenly no income and having to start from scratch and rebuild my life and help my wife to do the same thing. And my wife, because of contact with an alien craft, has a terminal illness. So,
Wow.
we've pretty much, we've just been through the gambit on everything.
Yeah, and it started basically the day you moved in. From the start when the previous owner's furniture hadn't been moved, and then you requested a real estate agent to get it moved, and you went away for a few hours and came back and found all the furniture in your pool, but you don't know how it got there. And then not long after that, a mysterious figure walking up your driveway carrying a large machete and describing himself as a monster killer.
That's exactly right. And I should say, it wasn't just the furniture that was in the pool. It was boxes and boxes of personal items. It was the appliances, refrigerators, washers and dryers. I mean, the pool it's a 10-foot deep pool, and it's a big pool. And it was loaded up to the point where all these objects were 5 and 6 feet above the water line.
Yeah.
So it was really packed.
Did you ever figure out how it all got there?
No, nobody would ever take responsibility for it. I spent over a week dragging everything out, dredging the pool and dragging it out to the front of the property and just leaving it there. And it gradually just disappeared.
What about the guy who walked up your pathway with the machete? Have you ever seen him again?
No, not at all. I mean, he literally, just this grizzled kind of looking man that, probably a Vietnam vet that was not doing so well, just he just walked up the path, and I met him halfway, and I asked him what he was here for. And he said, well, I live here. And I said, well, I just bought the place and you're not anywhere in the paperwork. So, it's time for you to pack your stuff and go. And I escorted him back to this building that was on the back of the property, a kind of a shack. And I told him, I said, I'm going to use this area for my tack room because I'm going to have horses. Unless you know how to train horses, I don't need you. And he said, well, I don't train horses. I kill monsters. And I said, well, I don't have any monsters for you to kill. I don't think we need your services. Thank you very much. And he grabbed a couple of pillowcases in the corner and filled them up with his stuff and threw them over his shoulder, and off he went. And just before he left the property, he turned around and looked at me and he says, you're going to really regret this.
Okay, so that's a good segue to get into what's happened. I mean, obviously you've regretted it in some way, and did you figure out, or did it come to light, what he meant by monster killers?
Well, what it actually, I have never had a chance to sit down with him and have a, secondary conversation, but I imagine what he meant by monsters was the same thing that we've seen, and that is we've seen various different anomalies, everything from gray aliens to UFOs to creatures that we don't even have names for. They don't communicate, but they used to be out in the desert before they built homes around us. Uh, and it turns out over the years, people have come forward to me and said, look, we've been seeing all this stuff for years too. We just didn't have anybody to tell it to. And we were afraid to say anything because we were afraid people would think we were crazy. And
Yeah,
I told him, I said, well, I've never worried about that. I thought it was too important from a scientific point of view and from a, just a general cultural point of view, just to let it go. So I kind of stuck my neck out and stood up and told the truth.
yeah. Well, for those who aren't familiar with the book, Stardust Ranch: The Incredible True Story, do you want to kind of relay to us a couple of the more significant events that have taken place?
Well, I'd be happy to. Basically, we gradually progressed from uh, having no horses to my going out in the desert and kind of wandering around out there in a Jeep to find out what was out there. I mean, I always had this creepy feeling that there was weird stuff out there, but I didn't really know what it was. And so I took my Jeep and drove out in the wilderness, and I started coming across all these horses. And I thought to myself, well, Arizona has horses, but they don't have this many horses. And all these horses seem domestic. I mean, you could go right up to them and feed them, and they were perfectly happy to, to see you. And wild horses just aren't like that. And so I thought, well, these poor horses have been dumped out here. And so I went back to town and I got bales of hay and I got, feed. And I started going out there every morning and feeding the horses. Well, it didn't take very long before the horses decided that I was the feed wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'd leave, they just kind of gallop behind me and follow me back to the ranch. And so I started getting a lot of horses that way.
Yeah,
And, when you have horses, you got to be up early in the morning and feed and water. And at night, you got to do the same thing. Well, you're outside a lot. And so being outside a lot, I started seeing things in the sky. So I started seeing UFOs. I started seeing uh, these orange orbs, as I called them. And before long, I realized that, for sure they were not natural and that this was connected to something much bigger. And then March 13th of 1997 is when the Phoenix Lights occurred here. And that absolutely documented everything that I was seeing and what I was, gradually beginning to report. And, I took video of everything. I mean, we have such good proof, it's not even funny. And, we've been a little reluctant to share most of it just because of the fact that there have been threats and, there has been attempts to prevent us from going ahead and getting the word out. That's the biggest reason we did the book. Uh, was because of the fact that we needed to get this information out in the public. And gradually over time, it's going to be a series of books that are all related, because what we're seeing here at Stardust Ranch is just the microcosm of a much larger picture. And that goes back thousands and thousands of years. So, we're just reporting it firsthand.
yeah. When you say threats from authorities?
Well, we don't know. I mean, we've had situations where people have shot at us from across the street up on the mountain, to the point where it was so bad that my wife and I got trapped behind a horse water on the ground and had to call the police, and the sheriff came out, but they never caught anybody. There's been a lot of real negative feedback, and there's been a lot of good feedback. But the bottom line is that bullets speak louder than words.
Yeah, because I was reading some of the comments, and one person was talking about, well, he tells a good story, but he doesn't offer any proof, no photographs. And I was going to
Oh,
ask, I mean, you obviously got plenty of proof, but
oh yeah.
you can't produce it.
Well, we can. I mean, we have proof, but again, the thing about it is that this has sort of been a gradual process of putting the word out there. Uh, you know, this is the only place I have to live right now, and until I can get out of here and go someplace else where I basically can, you know, be unknown, I'm not real eager to go ahead and stick my head on the chopping block. I mean, the stuff we have is brutal. You know, we have really good proof. You know, as it is, you know, I was asked by a guy by the name of Dr. Levengood in Grass Lakes, Michigan, to go ahead and send him samples of a dead ET. Well, you know, he instructed me on how to go ahead and prepare that ET for transport. And I did that. And he actually had all the remains of that ET sent out to various different labs. And, you know, these were uh, anonymous samples, so they didn't know what they were getting. They went to major universities around the country, and all that information came back, and it confirmed that it was not of terrestrial origin. That they had never seen anything like it before, because it contained not only characteristics of plant matter, but also of an organic living creature. And, you know, as we both know, there's no way a plant and an animal can be both.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we were told that is the defining proof that ETs are here and that we are being visited at this ranch.
Is that an ET? I read in the book where there was an ET that was killed. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, that was the very first one.
Okay. What type of ETs are they? Are they greys?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a typical gray, like you know, you see represented all over the place. I mean, there are various different types of grays. We've had pictures, video of a couple of different types. You know, we've had, like I said, the samples. We have actual, you know, we have an alien rock that was dropped by one of these grays on the back of the property while investigators were here. And, you know, I mean, we have so many witnesses and things for proof. It's not even funny.
Hmm. The UFOs or the craft you're seeing, are they all similar in shape? I mean, you talked about the Phoenix Lights. That was a triangular craft. Is that what you were seeing?
We've seen triangles. We have seen saucers. We've had other people. Carrie Cassidy filmed a flying saucer here on the property. There's just been so many different types of things. You know, we have two portals that are here on the property, and Rainbow Valley apparently is full of portals. I mean, it's not just this ranch. There are others out here. You know, and as I've gone ahead and detailed some of the information, you know, we've had some pretty important families step up and actually say, hey, I own a dairy. You know, my family's been here for decades, and we've seen the same things that you see. You know, so people are starting to have some courage and stand up behind me and confirm some of this stuff. You know, and by the way, I never wanted this job. I mean, you know, if I had known what I was getting myself into, I'd have gone back to Chicago.
Yeah, yeah. Did you even believe in the paranormal before you moved there?
Well, let's put it this way. It wasn't a state of believe or disbelieve. It was just a point of, you know, anything's possible. I mean, I'm a logical, rational person. And, you know, one has to depend on their, you know, facilities to be able to determine what truth is and what it isn't. And I'm also a very faithful person. And so, you know, I had a lot of conflicting emotions about the whole thing when it first started. I didn't want to believe it was true. I mean, it kind of broke my heart because this ranch I'd been saving up for since I was a child. And, you know, I worked all sorts of jobs in Chicago and in Illinois, all over the place to try to save up money for it. I finally got a chance to buy it, and it turned out to be the most disastrous thing I ever did. So, you know, hasn't been a happy story for us.
Yeah. Um, Talk about the portal. I mean, that's really interesting. What do you think it is? Where does it lead? What comes through it?
Well, we have seen all sorts of things come through it. We've had experiences here on the ranch where my wife and I were watching TV one night, and all of a sudden the power went out, and we were sitting there in absolute darkness. And the next thing we knew, it looked like two Roman soldiers that were dressed in
Wow.
full Roman gear, literally just suddenly showed up walking through the house, and like somebody was showing a black and white movie. And we had no idea about it. We had no understanding of what it was, but we just sat there and watched it for probably 20 seconds, and then it was over. They just literally just walked right in front of us and walked past us and passed on through another wall and disappeared. And we were just sitting there absolutely dumbfounded.
Wow. So it kind of seems like there may have been a crossover of dimensions.
Well, that's precisely it. What we're finding out and what we've been told in that is that certain places on the earth are one dimension comes very close to rubbing against another or touching it, and so things exchange between the
Yeah.
dimensions.
Did they see or acknowledge that you were there?
No, no. It was like I said, it was like somebody was showing an old black and white movie.
Yeah, yeah. What's really been frightening that's come through it that you've seen?
Well, for some reason, I'm not a person that ever is afraid. I mean, I get mad, and maybe my anger engulfs any fear emotionally. But um, things that have been trying for us is we have seen reptilians that have come through. We had a friend of ours that was on Ghost Adventures with us, and she was sleeping on the sofa one night as she was visiting, and about an 8 foot tall reptilian, according to her, came through. I didn't see it personally. I was asleep. Everybody tried to wake me up. I didn't
Wow.
even wake up. But my wife saw it, and my friend Elizabeth saw it, and apparently it was pretty scary.
Yeah. Your wife one night was they attempted aliens attempted to abduct her.
Yes, yes. They seem to go for the path of least resistance. And my wife was at first an absolute dissenter in terms of believing in any of this. She just kept thinking that the whole thing was, just bizarre, but it couldn't possibly be true. She was very strongly in denial until the first attack. And then afterwards, even then, she didn't want to believe it. And then finally, when she saw it herself and she found herself levitated above the bed, about 3 feet off the surface of the bed, and three grays standing there, that was when she became a believer. But she does have sleep issues, and she uses a CPAP machine. And this particular occasion, they literally floated her out of the house and tried to take her up into a craft. And I woke up. I couldn't wake her up. I couldn't stop the process, but I ended up grabbing a semi-automatic AK-47 and walking outside. And she had told me, she said, if I'm ever abducted, I want you to shoot the bastards. And I don't care what the results is. If you end up killing me in the process, so be it. And so I emptied both a double clip into the cone of light that was she was trapped in going up into the ship. And by the time she got to the top of the bottom of the ship, they dropped her. And I used my body to shield her from crashing back into the ground.
Yep.
And she knocked us both down and knocked us both out for a few seconds. And then we went back into the house. But that's how she was exposed to the radiation that ended up giving her the disease that she's suffering from now.
Goodness me. How long ago? How long ago was that?
Let's see, must be 6-7 years now.
Wow. And is she doing well now?
She's hanging in there. The disease is something called scleroderma, and apparently, according to officials that we've spoken to, because there were a number of alphabet agencies that have questioned us and come out here, we were told that this is something fairly common for teams that go out and retrieve UFOs.
Wow.
And so, they don't talk about it. I mean, obviously, but it is something that occurs, and there is no real treatment for it.
Yeah, it's ironic too, John, isn't it? Because your wife Joyce was the one who had a bad intuition about the place from the moment you moved in.
Absolutely. I mean, she literally did everything but jump up and down and stand out front and say, "I refuse to move in," And at the time, I was probably less than the best husband. And I just told her, I said, look, we've looked all over, multiple states all over the place to try to find something where we can do this, and we can't afford anything better than this.
Yeah.
And at the time, it seemed like a perfect solution. It was very isolated. It allowed both of us to go back to work in the city if we wanted to. But at the same time, I had planned on keeping this place and retiring and just, having a horse ranch. And, I thought it was a summation of all my dreams. And
Yeah.
so it started falling apart.
Yeah. The term, for people who don't know, evil doppelgangers, I noticed mention in the verbiage. What do you mean by evil doppelgangers?
Well, we have had both examples of myself and examples of Joyce at different times where we couldn't even tell that we weren't talking to the other person. We were literally talking to something that looked exactly like the other person. And in one particular case, I drove all the way to town and took her out to dinner thinking that I was with my wife, and didn't know until literally when I looked in her eyes, and she just, I could tell something was wrong, and it got up and walked off and went into the ladies' room. And then I got a phone call from my wife back home on my cell phone, and she goes, "Why did you leave me?" And I went, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I'm here at home. Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at the restaurant." And I said, "But how is that possible? Because you're here with me, and you're in the bathroom right now." I said,
Goodness.
"So, how does this
Wow.
work? How can you be at home and be in the bathroom at the restaurant?"
Yeah.
And then she explained to me, she goes, "That's absurd. Why are you making this up?" And I said, "I'm not making it up." And I went to, I asked somebody to go in the bathroom and find the doppelganger, Joyce, and couldn't find her. And
Gone.
I thought, oh my God. So I drove back home, and Joyce read me the riot act, and I explained to her what happened, and she was horrified. But
Goodness.
we went through the same thing on our honeymoon in Hawaii. And, so, I mean, this has happened a few times during our relationship. So we don't understand it, but we don't know why it happens, but it happens.
Yeah. What about the voices? I would describe as demonic.
Um, well, that's not something that I've heard. That would be something that Joyce has heard. And we try to kind of keep her out of things as much as possible because she's still working professionally, in the mental health field.
Hmm.
She left the FBI and went back to working in mental health. And so we have to be kind of careful about, protecting her
Yeah.
privacy.
Yeah. Two more things on your experiences. Animal mutilation. Has there been plenty of those?
Well, I wouldn't say plenty of them. I mean, it's, two or three is enough for me. But yeah, well, unfortunately, we have had situations where I went out to feed in the morning and found horses that had been mutilated horribly. And the beyond the actual horrible spectacle and the loss of the life, what was very interesting about it was the fact there was no blood involved. All the blood had been removed. The incisions to remove organs and remove parts of the horses in two of the cases were as if somebody used like a laser. It was absolutely precision done. Uh, which again, this was something that when I reported this to Dr. Levengood, he specialized in working with that particular phenomena.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other one is a topic that I've covered quite a bit on this program. Men in Black.
Mm, yes. Um, Literally, the longer I have lived here, the more well-armed I've become. That might be an emotional reaction, but it's also a practical reaction. And so I collected a fair amount of guns. And so when you own weapons, you need to clean them and maintain them. Otherwise, they're dangerous when you fire them. And so this particular day, I had a picnic table full of guns that I was working on cleaning and making sure they were all up to par. And a friend of mine was there with me. And all of a sudden, two SUVs pulled up in front of the ranch, and they had government plates, dark colored. I think they were like Chevy Suburbans. And two men got out, and they proceeded to walk up through the front gates and come up and meet me halfway in the driveway. And at the time, I didn't even know what men in black were. I mean, to me, they looked like the Blues Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I was like, who are these guys? And literally, they got up about maybe 2 or 3 feet away from me. And one looked me in the eyes. He had sunglasses on, but he looked me in the eyes and he said, "You need to stop reporting the information on the cause website that you are reporting. That must stop now." And that was all he said. And the cause website is a website that used to be maintained by a gentleman by the name of Peter Gersten, who was the UFO lawyer, as he was known at the time. And he and I became friends. Eventually, he even became my attorney. And he ran this great site, and anybody could go on there and read about what was going on in the paranormal world and UFO world, and you could make reports of the things you were seeing at the time. And this is going back, I don't know, 15, 20 years
Yep.
ago. But I did that on a regular basis, and a lot of the things that I did in the beginning were my sort of me getting semi-comfortable dealing with this phenomenon and trying to get feedback from people and learn about it, because prior to this I really didn't have anything to be able to work with. And I was trying to educate myself. I mean, I'm an educated person in general, and to to come into something like this and feel like you're just blindsided by everything that comes, that is very disconcerting.
Yep. 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 Did these men in black, did they look human to you?
Well, they appeared human, but the strange thing about both of them was the pallor of their skin. I mean,
Right.
it looked like uncooked chicken. I mean, they were kind of it was kind of wet looking, and it was just a strange color. Almost looked like corpses, walking corpses.
Yep. Yep. And did you feel like you were compelled to listen to them? I mean,
No, no, I see, that's the whole thing. I seem to have a little bit of a different emotional reaction to things than most people. I've spent so many years working clinically that I can detach myself in almost any situation and just look at it for what it is.
yeah.
I try very hard not to allow my emotions to get involved in these things, because, once you react emotionally, you lose all objectivity. And at that point, you're just more or less, you're allowing yourself to be a victim.
Right. Right. John, you're familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we talking about similar occurrences to what happens on Skinwalker?
Well, it's hard for me to say, and I'll tell you why. Because everything that's reported on Skinwalker, I reported 10 years earlier at Stardust
Right.
Ranch.
Wow.
And so, and indeed, what's his name? The Bigelow, Robert Bigelow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He absolutely was obsessed with Stardust Ranch, and tried to buy the ranch from me. He didn't want to pay anything for it, but he was calling me, 7, 8, 10 times a week, trying to get me to sell it to him. And I just said, well, if you're going to buy it, you're going to pay something reasonable for it. I mean, what you're offering, I can't even pay off my mortgage.
Yeah.
And so, it was one of those situations where we just never were able to reach any kind of an accord. But I think he bought Skinwalker because he couldn't buy Stardust.
Wow.
Now, there is another ranch that's in between, uh, and that ranch is the Bradshaw Ranch. And that ranch has had a lot of the same similarities. And the interesting thing is that all three ranches are directly in a straight line.
That's what I was going to ask you, whether they're parallel with each other.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So what's been going on at Stardust? Stardust probably should be getting the fanfare that that Skinwalker's getting right now.
Well, it's never been about that for me. I've gotten a lot of information from living here. I've been, I've sort of had a dipped in the events that have happened. So I've had no choice except to, either learn it or walk away. But it's not about the money. It's not about anything to do with any of that. What I want is a better future for the world. And I think that for whatever reason, because I relate to these things maybe a little bit differently than most of these other people do. I mean, I hear an awful lot of talk about fear. I hear an awful lot of talk about, all the bad things. And yeah, there are a lot of bad things that have happened here. but I try to look for the positive in everything. And so, I have a different attitude towards it than most people do.
Yeah. Have you ever been approached to create a series similar to what we're seeing now with Skinwalker?
I've had people come and talk to me about it. We did an adventure episode of Ghost Adventures a few years ago, and that was very well received. I think at the time it was probably the highest rated episode they had at that point. Certainly, we'd be open to doing things. I mean, what I don't want to do is turn it into a spectacle. This
Yeah.
is not, alien Disneyland. This is a very serious, very old phenomena that's been going on. I mean, I've been told, that this phenomenon has been going on over 8,000 years. And so, we found things here on the ranch, artifacts, all sorts of things. The whole area is full of artifacts. So people that are serious, that have the education, they have the tools, they have the information, they should investigate all this. The bottom line is that what we don't need are a bunch of egos, banging heads over, trying to make a primetime TV show or a movie or something that's all about money and all about the spectacle. It
Yeah.
needs to be done properly. It needs to be done in such a way that the number one objective is the truth.
Yeah, there's a lot of acting that goes on in some of those shows.
Exactly.
John, what about the native or the indigenous people that live in the area? Have you ever spoken to them and asked them what you may be dealing with?
Well, what they've told me, I've had different tribal members, from different tribes speak to me over the years. And what they're telling me is that this used to be a ceremonial ground and that it also used to be a burial ground. And the whole area was. And so, they came here to do magic ritual. So, yeah, I mean, it has a very long history.
Yeah. What about investigators? Have they been there trying to make sense of what's going on?
We've had people that have come out. Bigelow, in the beginning, I allowed one of his teams to come out for about 10 days. And, they're all old FBI and alphabet guys that he hires to do these kind of things. And they came out and they did everything. The only thing I wouldn't allow them to do was dig. They wanted to dig up the property. And I just told them, I said, that's not going to happen. I said, anytime you do any kind of digging around here, the next thing that happens is we start having fallout from it. And I said, if you're going to dig into it, you got to buy it.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, and that's fair enough. John, I mean, you spent a long time working as a counsellor in the mental health area, dealing with psychology and psychiatry. I mean, do you feel sometimes that, you're going a little bit mad?
No. I've been very careful to try to be objective and to keep a record and to do things, I tried to use my professional skills in order to go ahead and present a case that could be presented in court. Okay. I mean, I worked directly with the Superior Court of Arizona as an expert witness. And so anything that I have done with the courts, I had to be able to go out there in front of a judge and make a good case for it. And so I thought to myself, well, you know what? If I can do that, I can certainly do the same thing with this.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did, and my wife being, ex-FBI, she worked in the Organized Crime Bureau. We were in a position where we could professionally treat this objectively as much as possible.
Right. Is the ranch for sale?
Anything's for sale at the right price.
Right. That's fair enough. John, just before we close, people reading the book that haven't seen the book or heard about Stardust, do you think they should release like any sort of religious mindset and remain open-minded when analyzing the information?
There's three things. There's spirituality, there's religion, and then there's just a detachment. And I think that anytime that you're going to try to analyze the situation for data or for trying to be logical and rational, you need to leave all religion out of it, because this doesn't have anything to do with religion. Religion is man created.
Yep.
I am a very spiritual person. I believe in God. I mean, I wouldn't have my life today if it wasn't for God. But you can't use one tool for every application. You know, I mean, not everything's a hammer.
No.
So, you know, you got to use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah. Yeah. Should you have listened to your wife's intuition?
Well, there's a lot of ways to look at that. From a practical point of view, from being a good husband, absolutely. I should have said, you know what, you're absolutely, you're absolutely right. Even if I don't know why you're right, you're right. And we never should have bought the place. But it happened. And I guess destiny said that I was going to be the person that, you know, when it happened, that I was going to stand up and do what I've done. I've tried to be as honest and to be as, you know, forthcoming as possible and tell the truth.
Yeah.
And you know, I'd be the first person to tell you it's a messy situation. You know, I'm not a media guy. I'm not a professional anything except a psychiatric social worker. And
Right.
so, you know, I didn't know how to do any of this. It's just happened. I've
Yeah.
tried to do the best with what I had.
Yeah. Last question. Are you blaming anyone for what's been happening?
No, no, it is what it is. I mean, you know, everybody's truth is their own, and everybody's life story is their own. And you know, if there's anybody to blame for any of this, it's me.
Yep.
You know, I'm the one that accepted it, and I was the one that when things started getting rough, I made up my mind rather than you know cut and run that I was going to stand up to it and fight like hell.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's encouraging though that you know there are others in the area that are reporting the same thing, and it's not just yourself.
Well, thank you. And I would agree with that, but I would just tell you this, and that is, you know, everybody has a choice in their life whether they want to be a victim or not. I'm not a victim.
Right. That's very honest. Thank you, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
John Edmonds joining us today.